Robertson for the housekeeping.
Thank you, Chair. The meeting is being recorded and published online after the meeting. Could all attendees leave their camera on but switch off their microphone when not speaking, but switch on both camera and microphone when you are invited to speak so that this is picked up in the recording. If you wish to speak, please use the raise your hand function or indicate in the meeting chat and I will alert the Chair. I'll now do a roll call and would ask that members confirm their attendance when their name is called so that this is clear in the recording and can also be recorded in the minute. Councillor Gregg, Chair.
Present.
Councillor Cook.
Present.
Richie Johnson.
Present.
Hussein Patwa.
Present. Morning.
Morning. Thank you. And we have apologies from Alex Stephen and Michael Oliphant. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Do members have any declarations of interest or transparency statements that they wish recorded? Nope, there are none. Thank you. Item 2.1 is exempt business, of which there is none. 3.1 is the minute of our previous meeting, which was held on the 10th of September 2024. Are there any problems with the accuracy of that minute, or anybody, any concerns or questions about the minute? Nope, we're content. We're all content with that as an accurate record of business transacted. Grand. So minute is approved. Thank you. Then the business planner. Are there any questions on the business planner at 3.2? Fraser.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, just a couple of things from me. You will see that we've removed the primary care improvement plan. That's because this year it's just landed a couple of weeks or so after the integration joint board considered an update on that. What I'm proposing in terms of going forward, just based on a couple of discussions over the last week, is we'll put to put the annual primary care improvement plan up to IGB, and then bring an interim update at sort of the halfway mark to the risk audit and performance committee. So if members are content with that, we'll take that forward.
That sounds acceptable. So there is scrutiny, adequate scrutiny there. Everybody content with that proposal? Yeah. Okay. Grand.
And then just a second thing, Martin, I was looking ahead to the February meeting, and you'll see there's quite a number of references to finance in there, I think just reflecting recent decisions, including that at the recent IGB. So I think what we can do is consolidate lines 22, 23 and 25 in the business planner into one report. And that report would be a finance update to provide an update on the financial position, including the latest quarterly projections as they become available. So if members were content with that, I'd look to consolidate those three reports into one.
Yeah, I think that sounds a good way forward. Avoid duplication, help us to keep that focus on what could be a very lengthy and a very lengthy report. So are we committees content with that proposal? Yes. Thanks for that, Fraser. Anything else on the business planner? Nope. Okay, so we can note the business planner. Thank you very much. Then the internal audit update report is 4.1, which is from Jamie Bell. Jamie, do you wish to introduce the report? I think it's quite straightforward.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is our standard report where we give an update on the status of the internal audit plan, summaries of the internal audit reports presented to committee, and then an update on the follow-up of recommendations. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? It's a very, very concise report with health and social care partnership commissioning. They're highlighted. There's a review in progress there. I think it's very straightforward. Are we content to note this and agree the recommendations? Yes, we are content with that. Thank you very much, Jamie. And remaining with yourself, we're on to 4.2, the social care financial assessments.
Thank you, Chair. The objective of this audit was to obtain assurance that adequate arrangements are in place to undertake social care financial assessments and they are accurate and in an efficient manner. For this review, we've assessed the area presenting a major risk overall, and we've only been able to take limited assurance over the operations of the service. The report sets out internal audit's findings overall, but the major risk is driven by three areas: the charging policy, written procedures, and then supporting records. For the charging policy, this review identified that it was approved in 2019, but the policy had not been implemented and service users continue to be charged on a different basis from the agreed and published policy. This has the potential to have a detrimental impact on the service and service users' finances, compounded with the reputational risk of operating in such a way. With written procedures, we found that the processes are reliant on existing staff and procedures for the new care management system are still under development. This underdevelopment aspect also extends to procedures and training for the completion of financial assessment application forms. Finally, for supporting records, calculations are largely carried out by the system itself, reducing the risk of manual error. However, it is evident that there are further calculations and adjustments being completed prior to data entry. These further calculations, the sources of further information and assumptions made are either not being completed or are not being retained along with supporting documentation on the system that we were able to evidence. We found that adjustments are being made regularly to change the values recorded on the system, and whilst in individual instances the impact would have a minimal impact, it does mean that different thresholds are being applied than those required and accurate data is not being recorded. Management and the response recognise the current challenges and weaknesses in the system, and I'm pleased to say they've agreed to a time-bound action plan for all the findings, not just the majors I've covered today. The report was presented to the Council's Audit Committee last week and is now here in its final presentation. Thank you and welcome any questions.
Okay, thanks very much, Jamie. I found this a very useful report. It does bring to light quite a few areas of concern. So the chart, I mean, it was very useful to see that there have been historic practices in place for charging, which were somewhat outdated. So I think we would be looking for reassurances that that process has been reviewed, and those issues of consistency have been dealt with. There's mention of a large backlog of financial assessments. Was it 1.5 million pounds, which is quite considerable. That was in March 2024. That was one of the key details for me in the report. There was also mentioned that it's a very small team, so there was clearly scope there for efficiencies, for more focused procedures to be in place. So I think it'd just be useful to have some reassurances that we've got a robust, effective action plan for going forward to process the financial assessments, because we are looking at large amounts and affecting a great deal of people. We're going to have Claire, you wish to come in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just to give a bit of assurance in terms of the backlog of financial assessments. As you quite rightly point out, this is very concerning. There is a very small team within Aberdeen City Council finance team that undertake the assessments. What we have done earlier in the year, we funded 2 additional posts. So the partnership funded 2 additional posts to clear that backlog. That was working very well. Unfortunately, the 2 post holders have now moved on, so we are actively recruiting to cover them. So we were making very good progress with the backlog. and we're hoping to get somebody in post. But there is definitely a reduction in the backlog. It is unfortunate that the two post holders have moved on, but we will get them that post filled as soon as possible. And we have a very tight action plan, working on all the recommendations of this internal audit. There was some issues obviously with COVID. There was obviously building that we had to do into D365, so into our system, making that much more efficient in the oversight and the processes. So that has all been worked on. So we just to give you assurance that we are on track to making things a lot better.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I mean, clearly the resource aspect is crucial. We need to have the team in place, as well as addressing the weaknesses in the procedures. I mean, there's mention there of the policy not matching what's been published. So quite a variety of issues to be dealt with on this issue. We also have Richie.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Claire. It was one of the points I was going to just ask about as well, so it's useful to hear. In terms of the additional, at this point, and then maybe a couple other ones, if that's okay. The increased resources, is that on a permanent basis or that interim? And kind of related to that was, I guess this might be a spent save almost issue as well, depending on, I guess, what the outcome of the financial assessments would be. And this kind of secondary question connected to that was around if we had any indication about what the overall financial impact was in terms of the inability to carry out the financial assessments, if you like. Does that mean we're under recovering in terms of income, or are we overcharging potentially in terms of income? Just to get a feel for what the consequences of that would be. And then my final question, if that's okay, Chair, was just again, really good positive management response, which is great. And there's a tight time bound, I think, action plan that's been agreed to. Just again, reassurance about what the end point of that action plan was, just to get a feel for what that timescale is, would be helpful. Thanks.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor
Yeah,
Craig.
go for it. Yes.
Okay. Okay, so the first question was in terms of the additional posts. So they were fixed term posts. We were looking at 2-year fixed term. However, there is conversations at the moment with the finance team around a different structure moving forward, because this is a long-standing issue around the volume of financial assessments to be done, and we have to ensure that we've got the capacity to do that. So there is discussions in place whether actually it sits within the partnership and we take the responsibility of that. So that is ongoing discussions. In terms of the under recovery, and there is clearly an under recovery from this. I don't have an amount, Richie, at the moment. I'd have to go and find that out. It's hard to determine when the assessments haven't been done, but there will be an under recovery that we're working to recoup that. And I can't recall the last question you asked me.
Yeah, no, sorry, I fired in too many questions at one time.
It's okay.
It was I guess the end point about what for the action plan, just to get a sense of when that was. Is it 2 months, or is it 6 months, or is it a year, or how long?
Right, okay. So in terms of the action plan, we have got one of my service managers is leading on the implementation of the charging policy. So it was agreed in August. There's a huge amount of work to do in terms of the implementation, and we recognise that there needed to be a person leading this work. So one of my service managers is leading that work, and we are on track. A lot of the recommendations, we've got the timeline of December. So we are on track to be meeting all that recommendations, especially when we've got that one sole person working on this.
Thank you.
Good. Grand. Thanks very much. Then John Cook.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, I know we've kind of discussed this area a few times before, and I don't want to oversimplify things, but would it be right to characterize this issue as the practice that we've been doing is correct, and it's that the written policy has not caught up with what should be the correct practice, which is a problem, because it makes life difficult for service users to understand what they are entitled or not entitled to. But is that Would that be a fair characterisation of the issue?
Through yourself, Chair, from an internal audit perspective, yeah, I think that is correct. And when we looked at the design of the policy, it is there, but obviously it doesn't match the operations, and I think that's definitely the breakdown.
Important point, yeah, because the framework has to correlate with the operational side. Okay, thanks for that. Then Hussein.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I suppose it's a slight spin-off on John's question that I was going to ask anyway, and it's going back to the references to 2019 in the charging policy. Given the financial situation that we're currently in, it's very likely that that policy will need to change and change on a more frequent basis than has perhaps been the case in the past. And you talk about financial assessments, which is fine, but I was wondering if we could have a bit of reassurance that we have the capacity on the income maximization side, so that we can get the service users all of the support that they require, which also then has a direct impact on our revenue.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Who can help with that query? Fraser.
Hi, Martin. Yeah, I think Claire's dropped off, so I'll have a go. I think the point made is absolutely sound. So we will absolutely have to look at our charging more regularly than we have done in the past. One of the budget options we've consulted on for 25-26 is about looking at our existing charges with a view to potentially increasing them, but also looking at other opportunities to introduce new charges that we don't currently charge, and then really get into a routine of keeping them under review on an annual basis. The budget protocol that the IGB approved earlier this year and the supporting budget pathway that we've developed to implement the protocol has got the review of charging in there as a standard thing that we do on an annual basis. So we'll certainly be in a better position to do that more timely going forward. In terms of the resourcing thing, we absolutely have to make sure we've got the resource aligned to the income budget lines. Given the financial situation, we have to absolutely maximise our income to mitigate cost reductions elsewhere in the system. And I know Claire and Jonathan, who's on the call, have been working very closely together to make sure that we get the right resource around that.
Thank you.
Good.
I'm so sorry, I got kicked offline, John, just in the middle of your, I'm sure, really important question. And Fraser, I think, did you come in and answer it for me?
I hope so.
It was maybe it was bad timing or good timing, depending on what way you look at it. Apologies.
Not a problem. I think we got an answer. We got a good answer there. Thank you very much. Yeah, so issues around reviewing this structure and having a look at how the process is resourced, very important. I mean, there are also issues around the outcomes. There's mention of the overdue care assessments increased from 996 to 1237. So it's kind of going in the opposite direction that we want. So I'm just wondering, through that action plan, are there measurables that we'll be able to track in order to see that figure hopefully go down, get some reassurance that we're going in the right direction. Is that part of the action plan, that we will have some performance monitoring of overdue care assessments?
It is. So we get monthly figures that we're looking, and I'll let Jonathan come in and also. So we are looking at the numbers, because obviously we've got the backlog and we've still got the new ones coming in. Jonathan, do you want to add anything in terms of the backlog work?
Yeah, thanks, Claire, and thanks. Apologies, I've joined the meeting late. One of the recommendations is obviously to be tracking the care assessments, and clearly that's something that we are now doing as a result of the audit. So we kind of picked up the the mantle from those recommendations and tracking those. We're seeing a reduction over the last number of months, just in terms of not only the resource that's gone in order to assist with financial assessments, but also seeing that resource become more skilled and knowledgeable about the process has really helped. We are recycling that, and what I mean is we've had a bit of turnover in the team, so perhaps there's a little bit of a plateauing at the moment, but as we get resources back into the team to make the difference. But we are tracking those numbers and looking for them to reduce over a period of time. Unfortunately, that's not a period of time that's just a matter of days or weeks, but we are tracking those to make sure that we've got the numbers reducing and priority being given to those that are most important to get done, particularly those that have been waiting some time. But that's definitely something that we're working on a day-to-day basis to do. And clearly the second part of that is to try and find the right updates in terms of our digital and technological support and systems to be able to get through more of the assessments in a more timely way. That's another aspect that we continue to look at and see what we can implement as part of the overall prioritisation of improvements across the social care systems.
Okay, thank you very much. That's really encouraging to hear. I'm very glad to know that there is that very concerted action. So with and bearing in mind that it is it's a long-term action plan, I'm just wondering what further monitoring there is. I'm not sure if the audit function continues on social care financial assessments, continues to monitor. I think it's a very important area that we would probably want to come back to at some appropriate point. Jamie.
Thank you, Chair. So internal audit will carry out the standard follow-up process. So as each of those actions become due, we'll follow them up, and any which aren't completed or have to be extended will be reported back to this committee through the previous standard update report. But no, certainly it's a discussion I've actually got tomorrow with the SLT of the kind of Health and Social Care Partnership is around the audit plan for the next 3 years. And certainly I'd be expecting some follow-up around this area, if not the kind of backlogs, the procedures, the charging policy. I would definitely look to see that in the audit plan, which will come to the RAPC around February or March for approval.
Okay, good. Glad to hear it's staying on the radar. And Claire, anything to add there? Thanks.
Yeah, it was just to say we've got a group. Well, it was a short life working group, but it won't be a short life working group. Councillor Gregg, that group is going to be overseeing the charging policy, and we have got quite a big programme of work. So that group will remain in place, and they will be the ones responsible for monitoring the charging policy and the financial assessments. And it might be helpful to come back probably just before the start of the summer with an update on where we are with the work around the charging policy, because our aim is, obviously we've got the implementation of this, we've got our processes that we're going to be working on, but it's also around what else potential is there in the charging policy. Do we look at the rates, increasing charges? So there's quite a long-term piece of work there. So I'm happy to come back with an update around what's happening with that work.
Grand. Thank you very much. I think that more comprehensive overview I think that will be really helpful. Thanks very much, Claire. And thanks to the team. So I think we've reviewed, discussed and commented. Anything further to add? Can we agree the recommendations on that report? And okay, grand. Thanks everyone. Then 4.3 is RGB budget setting and monitoring. From Jamie.
Thank you, Chair. The objective of this audit was to ensure appropriate arrangements are in place regarding the IGB's budget setting and budget monitoring. Overall, being able to take reasonable assurance over a moderate risk area. We found clear governance and reporting lines, roles and responsibilities, and have been able to take assurance from the processes of partners. You don't need internal audits saying it, but financial sustainability and pressures is probably one of the biggest risks for the Health and Social Care Partnership. But what this review has done is looked at the underlying processes. And I think where we have made some recommendations which management has agreed to, it's positive to be able to take assurances over the process. But thank you, and I'll take any questions.
Okay, thanks very much. It is good to have your input, noting those positive movements, and there's quite a variety of actions underway. I just wanted to ask about the draft budget protocol and also about codifying the reserves policy. I'm not sure who'll be able to help with these questions, but we have discussed a budget protocol for the IGB, and that's in draft, is it? Just be useful to have an update on that, because I think that will help to integrate the budget planning and also that corporate charging policy, and help us to make sure that we're tracking finance. So Fraser, can you help with that?
Yeah, thanks, Martin. So since this report was drafted, the budget protocol's been approved and is being implemented. This year's a bit of a transition year for us moving to that budget protocol. So, for example, although it's very similar to Aberdeen City Council's budget protocol, we didn't go out to consult with the public in the first round, but we did join the council in consulting with the public during the second round of consultation, and that is just coming to a close now. So as part of 25-26, that will be the first year that the budget protocol is implemented in full. And as this report sets out down at section 4.8, that public-facing budget protocol is supported by a document called the Budget Setting Pathway, and that breaks down the protocol into more than 100 different separate activities to make sure that we're implementing the protocol with an appropriate RAG status alongside it. And what we found ourselves doing is just refining that pathway, adding in extra activities as we get audit recommendations like the ones you've got in front of you today, just to make sure that for every financial year we go through, we're continually refining and improving our process.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And yeah, in these in the economic climate, I think we have to work a little bit harder on the processes, but it's all very positive. Thanks very much. So Hussein.
Thanks very much, Chair. And can I firstly, before I go into my question, just echo your comments from the last item in that these reports are very concise and very readable. That having been said, can I ask if somebody could explain 442 in terms of cause and effect? What does that mean that we're not doing right in practice, and what is the potential impact of that? 442 appears to relate to the delegation of corporate resources, but I'm struggling to work out what that means in practice.
Okay, so 442. So who can help with that query? 2. Who's going to volunteer?
Yeah, I could help Martin just
Yeah.
look at it again. Yeah, so in terms of the corporate support to integration joint boards, I think that's been developed over a period of time. And I think the service that we've been receiving primarily from Aberdeen City Council has been settled for a number of years, as has the sum that the IGB is charged by Aberdeen City Council for the provision of those corporate services, those corporate resources. What the audit report was challenging us to do was to think about reviewing that on a regular basis and looking at it in accordance with the integration scheme. So if we look at the integration scheme for Aberdeen City IGB, that requires IGB, NHS Grampian and Aberdeen City Council to come together to look at the corporate resource that the IGB requires and to look at whether or not the budget resource to that corporate resource is adequate and proportionate and reflects the service that the IGB gets from its partners. So to address that, touching back on the budget setting pathway, we've specifically referenced the need to do this on an annual basis, look at, right, for the following financial year, what is the corporate resource that the IGB requires from Aberdeen City Council and or NHS Grampian, and what might an appropriate resource transfer be from the IGB to its partners to reflect the service that it gets.
Perfect. Thank you. That's really clear now. It just wasn't when I read it a couple of times over. So thank you for that.
Cool. Thank you very much. Then Richie.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Hussein and Fraser. That was going to be one of my first question as well, was to learn a little bit more about 442. And I guess I think my query's been answered, but just as an additional comment, and I think Fraser, you kind of covered it really well. My comment's going to, I guess that need to be a proportionate piece of work, that review, because you could tie yourself in knots depending how much detail you get into. So it's just that kind of balance around assurance that it's generally fair, but not getting tied in knots with it. My question was about 444, my other question, and it's that bit about the reallocation of strategic resources when work's done, and again maybe a similar kind of theme in some respects. If there was an example or it's anything you can point to that came through the audit, or I guess just a feel for any scale or impact of that cause and effect. I think Hussein mentioned just to get maybe a bit more depth in that one. And again, I know how difficult it can be for one partner to do a piece of work that might impact another financially, but just a little bit more on that, if that's possible. And as I say, if there's an example that you can perhaps potentially point to around where that might have been the case. And I'll qualify it to some extent by saying it is all public pounding largely, so we need to be careful about that balance of how much detail you get into here. So again, hopefully that's clear enough. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. So is that one for you, Fraser?
Yeah, I'll give it a go. So right now, as you said, Richie, like the resources are challenging, but certainly what's coming to the fore in discussions is just having a look at what the impact of the various IGB budget setting processes could be on other parts of the system. So as we'll touch on in the finance update paper later on in this agenda, some of the proposals for 25-26 could have a significant impact on other parts of the system, notably the acute settings within NHS Grampian. So that brings to the fore some discussions with the colleagues in the likes of NHS Grampian around, well, if there was a greater resource transfer from NHS Grampian into Aberdeen City IGB, perhaps we could invest more in community capacity, community resource, and help with flow within acute settings. So those are the kinds of conversations that we're starting to happen at the moment. As you say, Richie, it's about trying to look at the public pound as a whole across the 3 IGBs in Grampian, NHS Grampian, local authorities, and thinking about what is the best spread of resource, where's it best targeted to try and get the best outcomes we can for the residents.
Thank you. Perfect.
Okay, thanks very much. John?
Yeah, can I just kind of follow up a bit on that issue, because we all know that care at home package or a care home bed is cheaper than a hospital bed. For me, the conundrum is if NHSG transfers money to social care in order to improve our delayed discharge figures, it doesn't really save any money for NHSG, because the people who are discharged quicker from ARI free up some beds in ARI, but more people just go into ARI. So it's it just seems to me to be a bit of a conundrum. Has anybody got any right ideas on this one? Sorry, it's not terribly constructive. I'm just scratching my head a wee bit.
Yeah, it's a good point. Are we back to you, Fraser, on this, or a colleague?
Yeah, maybe not for the great ideas, John, but certainly for some commentary. Yeah, it's very challenging because we know as well that NHS Grampian's financial situation is very challenging, and the system isn't awash with cash. So there's a number of competing priorities, a number of competing risks that we're all trying to manage as best we can. We're all going to have to operate with higher levels of risk in delivering services across the public sector. I guess it's just trying to identify between us, taking that whole system approach, and the IGB playing its role in between different organisations and trying to support that decision-making process across the respective forums, whether that's Aberdeen City Council, NHS Grampian, Aberdeen City IGB, is trying to make sure we've got all the information we require to help make that balanced judgment.
Yeah. Okay with that, John? That's helpful. And then Jonathan.
Thanks, convener. I suppose if we'd managed to crack that, how do you get the fixed costs out of the system? In the last 20 years, we might be in a slightly different place now. I think that it is the wicked problem of there's effectively the purchase of capacity, that capacity being fairly fixed from an acute side, and being able to make that shift is something that without perhaps a long-term plan for what that looks like, it's incredibly difficult to, on a year by year, month by month basis, allocate resources in and out of resources that we don't know what the future is going to look like. So in some respects, you need to get to a point what that future looks like. And if that's a change to the shape and size of the, dare I say, the hospital estate, if this is where the investment comes from, in order to make that shift and say you can get more for your money and actually be the preventative side of things in a community setting, then that's something that needs to come forward, perhaps with that long-term view being embedded within it. But there's no doubt that shift and finding the answers to that shift is something that's been long searched for. And yes, as Fraser was saying there, trying to find the answers in difficult, I'll call, trading conditions is incredibly difficult when there's basically a call and a request and perhaps a justification for every part of the system having that bit of money that's currently allocated. And unfortunately, it perhaps ends up being the response side of things that gets that extra pound, when in an ideal world you would shift that, as you were saying, across to a prevention or perhaps a lower cost solution. I wish there was a solution for this and there was an answer, but I think if there was an easy one, then we as one IGB would be in a very different place, as in the same sense that all 32 would be in a very different place.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. Richie?
Yeah, thanks again, Chair, for letting me back in. Just on the back of the last few minutes conversation, just to, I guess, to rewind back to the audit itself. Again, we got moderate assurance, reasonable assurance, sorry, in terms of the overall position that we're in, which is great. And I think the work that we're doing collectively on the budget protocols, that joining up of conversations and planning and impact, understanding impact, again, is really important. So I think that's, again, is good work that's in play. And I guess ultimately, as colleagues, we were all reflecting is that if we can have an individual and collective, organisationally, individually and collective understanding about the impact on decisions on the services, then I think that's a step beyond perhaps where we've been before as well. So again, just being realistic, if you like, and transparent about, well, we can't quite continue to provide this service in this way, in the way we have done, and here's what that's going to look like. So I think there's still a lot of work to do, clearly, but I think that collective effort's definitely the right way to go. So thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much for that. No other hands up. Yeah. Yeah. I think that we're seeing the value of this audit item. It's really helpful to have the various sections scrutinising the medium-term financial framework, and that's helping to give us an understanding of the context in which the financial planning carries out, and how we can relate that to that prevention agenda that we want, so that we can adapt our limited resources, respond to very considerable demand. Callum's made the point there that we have the lowest proportion of hospital beds per population. So yeah, I think that this is very much helping us to have an understanding of how the budget setting relates very often incongruently with the health and social care provision side of things. So really good report, really welcome, and I mean, it links in with so much other discussion that we're having on financial planning and on budgets. So are we content with the recommendations there? Yes, good. That's agreed. So thank you very much, Jamie, and thank you, everyone. Again, with Jamie, 4.4 is the counter fraud paper. Over to you, Jamie.
Thank you, Chair. So the objective of this final review was to evaluate the adequacy and effectiveness of the internal controls over the IJB's approach to counter fraud. Happy to take any questions on this paper, but just to flag, at the request of this committee, each year myself, as the Chief Internal Auditor for Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire, works with the Chief Internal Auditor for Moray and also the Chief Internal for NHS Grampian to do a joint review of an area, and this year it was counter fraud. So this report reflects on the Aberdeen City practices, but to probably the next, if not certainly the one after cycle of this committee, you'll have an executive summary report pulling together assurances for counter fraud in the North East. But again, happy to take any questions today.
Okay, thank you very much. I think there's a core issue there about the need for a strategic control framework. So that's being actioned, I presume. Can anybody help with that query about following up, implementing, responding to this audit recommendation? Martin?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, so what we're planning to do is provide some kind of assurance map to kind of just map those controls as referenced in the audit. But also, as Jamie said, similar audits have taken place in Shire and Murray, so we're going to be linking in with them as well, just kind of sharing best practice too.
Okay, thank you. And then will we see that work at some point later?
Yeah, and I think Jamie, keep you right that you'd obviously be checking that the recommendations being actioned, but happy to share that with the committee if that's required.
Right. It's just if necessary in due course. That's great. Any questions? Any questions on 4.4? I think it's a very straightforward one. Nope. We're content with the recommendations there. Yeah, that's 4.4 approved. Thank you very much, Jamie. Really much appreciated. Really helpful. Thank you. Then that takes us on to 5.1. So 5.1, finance update. Any questions that we have on 5.1? on the finance update. Richie.
Yes, thanks again. Thanks for the paper. Just again, apologies. I still get my head around some of the kind of reporting structures and such like. It's just the issue around reporting to both the IGB and RAPC, this committee for financial scrutiny, and just that question around avoiding duplication of effort and clarity of remit and purpose across the two parts of the system, if you like, the two governing parts of the system. So just any comment around how we make sure that we don't start tripping over each other, or what role we play in both of those would be helpful. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. Fraser?
Thanks, Martin. Yep, so in terms of the terms of reference, the Risk Audit and Performance Committee would be responsible for taking the quarterly reports from the Chief Finance Officer. Because of the risk associated with our financial arrangements, we've escalated that to the Integration Joint Board. So, for example, we didn't pause to wait to take the Q2 report to this meeting. We took it to the IGB because that was at the earliest opportunity. Also noting on the back of the interim CFO's recommendation to bring a report on the finance update to both RAPC and IGB going forward, there will be a degree of duplication in terms of the information that you get. For RAPC, I would see us providing an update on the external audit recommendations and progress against those, but I wouldn't be taking those to the IGB. In terms of the quarterly projections and the recovery plan, I would see updates against those coming to IGB in the first week of February, and then a similar update coming again at the Risk Audit and Performance Committee. I think it's 3-4 weeks after that. One slight difference would be the external auditor recommended that we do a deep dive into aspects of our budget. We wouldn't be doing that at IGB, but I would see that being done at Risk Audit and Performance Committee. So I guess there will be a degree of overlap, Richie, just because of the risk the financial situation's causing us. That I think it is appropriate for the IGB to receive an update on the quarterly projections and an update on the recovery plan. I would see RAPC taking the additional step of doing a deep dive, and secondly, getting an update on the external auditor's recommendations.
With that, great. Yeah, obviously we want to avoid duplication, but this is an enormous challenge before us, and I think really concerted effort is needed. So yeah, we've got to balance the workload between IGB and the committee. John?
Yeah, kind of really Fraser's kind of answered what I was going to comment rather than ask. I think that as we agreed at IJB last month, a kind of frequent look at the financial position is absolutely right. I can't see it getting any easier next year. So yeah, I'm relaxed about the fact that there might be a wee bit of duplication, and I think the earlier you can see if things are on track or not on track, the better. So yeah, that's it really. I'd say Fraser's really kind of covered what I was going to talk about.
Yeah, good. Huge challenges ahead, and there are, I mean, it sometimes feels as if we're moving in opposite directions, or conflicting directions. For example, there's mention there of the very considerable increase in delayed discharge rate at a time where we're having to deal with that gap in our funding. So yeah, we need to have very intensive focused discussions to go ahead. So I think what's proposed is for the budget recovery plan is and dealing with those issues is appropriate. Are there any further questions on the finance update? Can we approve the recommendations in the finance update? Yeah, grand. Okay, that's approved. Then we move on to 5.2, the directions update from Alison McLeod. Any questions on 5.2 from members? I don't think there's anything particular to highlight in there. I mean, if we don't have any questions, can we? Nope. Richie.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Thanks, Chair. Just getting to my notes. Yeah, it's just a question on page 55 at 4.5, and it's the grant funding moving to a commissioned and contracted arrangement, which again I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of that kind of moving away from the annuality of that process. And just a question around, I guess, just a comment, does that feel like a better approach in terms of getting value for money overall? And are there any issues about that kind of transition from grant funded to commissioned and contracted in terms of continuity of service and such like? So just maybe a comment on some of the practical aspects of the transition would be helpful. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Richie. And Shona's on the call, so I saw her kind of nodding and smiling there, so I'm hoping that she's going to come in and comment on that.
Yeah, thanks. I'm happy to comment to that, Richie. Really good question. We have had a meeting with our grants providers already and set the stall out with them in regard to what the difference will be in regard to being a grant-funded provider moving across to a contracted provider and what the differences will be. We had contracts in attendance that meeting who went through in detail in regard to what the differences are, but the grant-funded or the current grant-funded providers left the room very buoyant and feeling that they were very well supported and that the transition would be relatively smooth and that it would be advantageous to them because the contract will be longer than this year-to-year grant funding arrangement that we're currently in. It outlined the fact that if we didn't fund these grant-funded services, we would still need them to be providing a service. So that indicates that they are actually providing a service which should be contracted. So it all just makes perfect sense to move them across, and everybody was really relieved to be awarded a longer contract than they've had previously. So it's all heading in the right direction.
Thank you.
Anything else on the directions update? Can we agree the recommendations? Yes, that's agreed. Thank you very much. We go on to 6.1, the risk appetite statement. Is from Martin Allen.
Yep, thanks, Chair. Just as a bit of a reminder, the IGB had the insight session at the end of October, and we discussed about the drafting of the refreshed strategic plan, which is going to be taken through the IGB in March 2025. So the refreshed strategic plan will be aligned to the medium-term financial framework, and it's proposed that the risk appetite statement and the strategic risk register also be aligned to these two documents. It was also further proposed that an IGB workshop session be held in the early part of 2025, and we're just sorting out the date for that. The senior leadership team will work to prepare more guidance around the risk dimensions and the interdependencies between those risk dimensions and the impact, aligning this to the refreshed strategic plan and the medium-term financial framework. Picking up on some of the discussion earlier under the financial process audit, we're going to be working with the Council, Bonacor Care and NHS Grampian around their risk appetite statements too, just to get that kind of alignment across partners, which I think will help the IGB when it comes to considering a revised risk appetite statement. In relation to the strategic risk register, the report outlines the main changes to the register in the last few months, which includes a new strategic risk around premises. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a very detailed and very structured report. I very much appreciate seeing that structure being built up that's linking the risk appetite, the strategic risk register, and the medium-term financial framework, and relating that to the revised strategic plan. So that's really helpful to have that comprehensive overview to guide us forward through the challenging risks ahead. And could I just ask about that new theme of was it property review?
Yeah.
Premises,
yeah.
Premises review, yes. That I think that's very welcome to see, and I'm just wondering if there's more information on what's the potential outcomes from that review. In the directions update, we noted that there would be review of, for example, Rosewell House. So is there going to be quite a broad-based study of assets, or is it going to be quite focused and specialized? I think that would be useful just to get a sense of that overall aim that could come out of this risk area.
I see Alison's put her hand up. I don't know if that's in connection with that. Thank you.
Can you help, Alison?
Well, hopefully I can help a bit. It's some of my team who are carrying out the review, although technically it's Sandy's area of remit, but I'll do my best. So what we're actually planning on doing here is just having a look at the way we use our buildings at the minute. That a lot of that work has already been done. We've identified some areas where we're maybe only using 50%, 75% of the space, and we're looking across the piece and also at properties that our partners in the area are using as well, see if there's any opportunities for collaboration and rationalisation, mainly focusing on improving service. So we've seen from the community appointment days work that it's we get more out of the visits or the footfall that we get from patients and clients coming onto premises. They can maybe get 2 or 3 aspects of support that they require at the one time. So that's very much more beneficial to them to have a kind of one-stop shop. However, it also would bring efficiencies and help us balance that bottom line, which is obviously a major consideration for us at the minute. So where we can, rationalise, as I say, group together and deliver multiple services from one area and perhaps release some costs in the way of we pay rental for some buildings, but we also at the very least have heating and lighting payments, etc. So that's the main focus of it. And as I say, we're well on with that, but it's a big piece of work. So we are trying to bite that off in little chunks. So we're focusing, I think we had about 6 premises that we were focusing on in particular. We've brought some proposals to SLT, which they approved already for 2 of those premises, and we'll move on to the next one beyond that. So it's not all going to happen overnight, and we've only got limited capacity, but we've certainly got plans to have a good look at every premises that we are operating from at the minute, as well as what our partners are doing and seeing where the opportunities are.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Yeah, it is an enormous exercise potentially ahead to review all of the assets. I thought it was useful to see. I think it's a very useful additional risk area to have identified, and I think that it's also helpful to note that there isn't an infrastructure plan in place to evaluate or assess the functionality of buildings and what they offer, what they could, how they could improve service delivery and so forth. And there's potential links with partners, with partnership working that might come out of this review. So I think it's a very, very welcome piece of work. You want to come back, Alison?
Yeah, thanks. Just on the infrastructure plan, just to say that is actually on our radar. We had it in our plan anyway, and you know, part of the premises review is really part of that, and will form part of the development. But we had a presentation from Gary Kidd at NHS Grampian the other week there at SLT around about NHS Grampian's plans for their infrastructure plan. So we're trying to align with that and make sure that we develop an infrastructure plan that is completely aligned to our partners, and obviously we'll be in touch with Aberdeen City Council as well as we develop.
Great, many thanks. John.
Yeah, just briefly, I think it's a really good paper. I don't have any issues with it. Just being pessimistic, I figure we need to keep a close eye on the risks around commission services, which is risk 1, and finance, which is risk 2. I think we'll get a clearer idea, and nobody's got a crystal ball, but when we get greater clarity on employers' NI contributions, and we get greater clarity about Scottish budget, I'm just thinking that we need to keep a close eye on those 2 risks in particular to see whether they need to be upped to very high rather than high. But I'm happy with the paper as is now.
Grand. Thanks very much. Martin, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and obviously the IGB will get that opportunity to keep an eye on it at the session in early January. Also, the senior leadership team considers it on a quarterly basis as well. So if there's anything that's SLT we're needing to escalate or raise the risk, then there's obviously an opportunity to share that with either this committee or the IGB as well. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Then over to Richie.
Yeah, thanks again, Chair, and again thanks for the report. As colleagues have said, it's a good report, good direction, good approach has been taken, and overall it does, I guess, indicate it's an indication of a system under some pressure when you see the rating of a number of the risks in the appendix. And again, more of a kind of observation that a lot of the risks are just on the cusp of going from high to very high. And I appreciate the paper's also got what happens in some cases if it does go to very high. So yeah, maybe just mostly an observation, but if there's a comment perhaps from colleagues around, if that does tip into a kind of red category, the highest risk category, then is that a trigger point for something else, an intervention happening, if you like? It would be useful just to understand maybe the process around about that. Thanks.
Okay. Would anybody like to come back? Martin?
Yeah, I think it's probably similar to what I said about the previous question. I think, you know, the IGB in the kind of governance process, there's the risk register goes to the risk audit performance committee twice a year. It goes to IGB once a year. There's an IGB workshop, which I've talked about. But I think, and also SLT considering it on a quarterly basis. So that's all determined within the board assurance escalation framework. But I think, given you know what you say, Richie, about some of the risks being on the cusp, I think if SLT are doing that review, and if one of those risks were to tip into the very high, then I think we would be alerting members to that and seeking some kind of report to the nearest meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. Yeah.
Fair enough. One point I'd like to ask about, I don't know if it's relevant, but just about an hour ago we got in our mailboxes Audit Scotland's NHS in Scotland 2024 finance and performance. Is that, I've just had a very quick look at it. Will that be factored in to the risk discussions? Sorry, that's an out of the blue question.
Yeah, and I think those kind of was that NHS Scotland? Did you say, Chair?
So Audit.
NHS
So
Champion?
so Audit Scotland have reviewed NHS in Scotland 2024. So it will be a national picture, but we may be able to draw some conclusions. We're able to find some points of comparison, which could be helpful in scrutinising our way forward, particularly around the risks on managing our finances and resources, property, and so forth. Fraser?
Yes, I saw that come through as well, Martin, and I always find these Audit Scotland reports quite helpful. They articulate things quite well and succinctly, and we definitely will have due regard to the content of that in the same way as we have regard to a recent Accounts Commission report when we brought the finance update to IJB. One of the lines that I took away from Audit Scotland as part of their media release, I'm not sure if it was in the report, was just about the fact that difficult decisions will be needed to operate more efficiently. And they do say that this will likely involve the withdrawing of some services with limited clinical value. And of course, we, a good 2/3 of our staff work for NHS Grampian. So it's clear that they're setting out the challenge that all health boards and indeed IGBs will have going forward, and we'll certainly have regard to that in developing our risk register. And also, as Martin says, when we discuss the updates to our risk appetite statement early in the new year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this Audit Scotland report will help us what we're doing. I think it helps to provide honesty, and it gives reassurance that we're taking very seriously the very difficult challenges before us, and we're looking at decision making with an even more critical eye. We have to be even more reasoned in our thinking. We have to defend very difficult decisions. So it all helps in that overall challenging picture. There's so Martin, there's mention of a workshop. Is that correct? Is that being proposed?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And maybe Alison can keep me right on the date that's been looked at. It's off the top of my head, it's sometime late January, I think, maybe.
There's an insight session on the 28th of January, and there's a topic specific seminar on the 18th of February, and I can't remember which one we're doing, but it's there.
Good. So that will help us to go into more detail, into more of a deeper dive into this risk landscape. Great. Any other questions, or can we agree the recommendations there? All agreed. Great. Thank you very much. Staying with Martin Allen, 6.2 is the emergency activation plan. That's 6.2.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So this report presents the IGB Partnership Emergency Activation Plan as per one of the duties a Category 1 responder undertakes under the Civil Contingency Act 2004. So one of those duties is to maintain emergency plans, which this emergency plan is here to achieve. The partnership have had a number of different plans and procedures in place that determine how any response to an emergency will be conducted, however, not in one place. So therefore, this plan pulls together those procedures into an activation plan. The plan will help the senior managers on call and other staff who respond to emergencies by documenting an activation process in a concise manner. In order for the Chief Officer to ensure that necessary powers are sub-delegated to the appropriate employees of Aberdeen City Council and NHS Grampian, the committee are being asked to instruct the Chief Officer to make and implement any reasonable and necessary arrangements regarding the response duties of the senior managers on call and other staff in connection with the IGB's work as a Category 1 responder under the Civil Contingency Act. The senior managers on call and all relevant staff will receive training on the plan, and the plan will be exercised on a regular basis. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Martin. I was very reassured to read this report. I mean, it's very high level, but even the detail that's provided sets out quite comprehensively civil contingencies, responses, and in these troubled times that we're living through, it's very good to see all of that planning going on behind the scenes. I did have a kind of a technical question, which was on the recommendation on instructing. So the request is that we instruct the chief officer to implement, just to check that. So the committee has that authority to instruct. It's not. I mean, it's a very serious one. So, but that authority has been delegated to the committee to make that decision. Is that correct? Just for clarity.
I mean, maybe John can keep me right in it. Obviously, what we're trying to achieve here is ensuring that the senior managers on call have got the appropriate powers to implement emergency response on behalf of the chief officer. If any incidents happen, there's a similar kind of sub-delegation in the council schema delegation. So I think it's just making sure that the wording is correct in that schema delegation in relation to the chief officer for the IGB.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that everything was squeaky clean. So if we have that reassurance, then that's fine. Richie.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks again, Martin. Again, another good report, and that kind of importance of pre-planning as best you can for these events and structures and such like is really important. So it's good to see the work continues. Question was just around whether there are any specific response plans for any particular risks that might be an issue in Aberdeen, the Aberdeen area, and the IGB in particular. So there may be on certain localities, certain facilities where a specific plan might be required. So I just wondered if there's anything to that level, or is that some of the work in progress that might be around, or indeed there might not be anything specific?
Thanks, Richie. It's a good question. I suppose this emergency plan is trying to be as generic as possible and as high level as possible to enable the partnership and the IGB to fulfil its duties under the Civil Contingency Act. So hopefully it covers things like the adverse weather events that we have had. So there's a big risk in the city, probably less so than in the Shire, but still, in the periphery in the city, we do get power cuts, etc. And there's obviously the need to check on vulnerable people in those areas. But also, I suppose, hopefully the plan is generic enough to cover things like the incident we had in the city a few weeks ago around a suspicious package, which was dealt with in collaboration with the council, but it was actually quite close to a number of sheltered housing complexes. And if it had been 100 yards down the road, then I think we would have been activating an emergency plan in relation to that. So as I say, hopefully it's generic enough to cover all those things. There's obviously work going on at a Grampian local resilience level, as well as nationally, about a national power outage as well, which a lot of the activation in this plan will help towards. So, and then when you would reference maybe specific sites, there's obviously lockdown plans in each of the kind of major sites that the partnership and the IGB are managing in terms of the health village and Wood End, etc. But I think this, as I said, this plan is hopefully high level enough to allow the senior managers on call that kind of go-to plan to start the response to an incident.
Great, helpful, thanks.
Okay, if there are Hussein.
Yeah, apologies, Chair, a little bit late off the mark there. I just like to say, echo everything that's being said. Really pleased to see this report before us. I'm just wondering, in terms of its effectiveness, and given that by its very nature, an emergency situation is quite often unforeseen, or even if the nature of the emergency is foreseen, for the people that we're trying to support, that puts them into an unforeseen position. I'm just wondering, in terms of consultation or engagement, or making sure that the practices and procedures in the plan are well done. Has any of that actually taken place? Or is that all going to be part of the ongoing planning for that? Especially given that a one-size-fits-all approach might not necessarily work. And I know, just if I can just anecdotally give an example, we had issues over the last couple of years. Weather has been mentioned, and certainly within the community, there has been talk that ways of keeping people informed. There's been talk about, for example, a vulnerable persons register and maybe expanding that out to those who might otherwise not be able to engage or have difficulties in doing that. So I'm just wondering where all that sits in terms of the ongoing development of this.
Thanks, Hussein. I suppose that last point about warning and informing is one of the duties under the Civil Contingency Act. So the IGB, the partnership on behalf of the IGB would be doing that. And I suppose the evidence of that is when there have been adverse weather events, we've been working closely with NHS Grampian and the council to make sure that any weather updates are being shared across our networks as well. The bit about consultation with citizens around the potential impact of this plan, I think is a really good question that I'm happy to take away and maybe think about how we can ensure that we have done a little bit of consultation around this and make sure that we are ensuring that people are aware of it and got views around the potential impacts that the plan might have. And then finally, I was going to say about the effectiveness. I suppose the IGB does receive an annual report which does go into detail about how the IGB has undertaken its duties under the Act. So there's another opportunity to maybe just reflect back on incidents that have happened and how the partnership and the IGB have responded to those. But I think the middle point, Hussein, is something I think that I'm happy to take away and see if we can do some consultation on.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful because we know that there are certain communities, disabled people, for example, particularly those with learning difficulties or disabilities, those that are perhaps living on their own, and obviously those with chronic health conditions as well, where there's a reliance on medication and so forth. You can see situations where they might be particularly challenged, either in terms of making that approach with emergency responders, or even their ability to independently try and extricate themselves from situations, whatever the situation is. And obviously there's a huge archive of evidence from the pandemic as to all the challenges that people experienced at that time. So I don't know what the mechanism is for doing that, but I'd be really interested to see how that can be taken forward to make sure that we have something which, as much as possible, captures all the unmet need that might be there should the untoward happen.
Okay. Okay, thanks for these contributions and the answers. Are we content to agree the recommendations at 6.2, bearing in mind all that we've said? Yeah, okay, that's great. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Martin, for the emergency action activation plan and the information. Thank you very much. 7.1 is Justice Social Work annual update and a performance report. I've got that at 7.1. Val is here. Do you wish to introduce Val, the report, or just take questions? Any preference?
I can do a short introduction if that's helpful. Happy to do that.
Yes, that would be great.
Thank you. So the report that you see before you is for noting, and it's our final report actually against our delivery plan, our service delivery plan for 2021 to 2024. It's not a report that is required to be submitted externally at all. It is for internal IGB governance purposes. However, it does include at the appendix, as you'll see, the statutory community payback order annual report for 2023-24, which is required to be submitted and has been submitted to Community Justice Scotland. the report itself provides an overview of progress as we work to meet the demand that comes into the service across the different areas. You'll see that things are definitely reverting to pre-pandemic levels in terms of volumes, the number of reports required to be prepared for court, numbers of individuals diverted from prosecution and on bail supervision, which is positive in terms of keeping people out of prison where possible and appropriate. We're seeing increased complexity and length of community payback orders, which allows kind of robust work with those individuals, and also in terms of the numbers of licenses and those released from prison whom the service also reports. Justice social work operates very much within a multi-agency context, and the report gives a kind of an indication around that, working with a whole range of partners, and including in relation to the very higher risk individuals as part of the multi-agency public protection arrangements. We're involved in a number of local outcome improvement plan projects. So again, working across agencies as part of that on a number of areas. And the report also sets out our plans going forward, which includes a priority to review our delivery plan, which will be refreshed to cover the coming period from April next year until March 2029, which will align with the Health and Social Care Partnership strategic plan period. So that's a quick overview, and I'm very happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Could I just kick off? I mean, it's the report highlights that there's very high demand on justice social work, and that that's increasing. There's some really useful information about actioning policies, for example, the diversion from prosecution social work, dealing with early release. I would imagine that these government policies can add to the pressures and not always help to resolve long-term suitable outcomes in the interests of the individuals and more broadly. And it was useful to see that we've got a very high proportion of individuals who are involved in the diversions from prosecution scheme. But I mean, I'm just wondering, we're seeing these very, very high pressures on health and social care, also on housing and other services, because of early release in particular. So I'm just wondering if there's any feedback on how teams are coping. We've got the MAPA arrangements, so I dare say that there's a sharing of that workload, but it will surely add to the pressures on the justice social work team.
Thank you. I'll come in, and then Claire, you want to follow, I'm sure. I mean, just to say really that yes, you're absolutely right, and we just on an ongoing basis do have to consider our resourcing across the service, and obviously it's very much welcomed in terms of diversion from prosecution and people not getting any further embroiled into the justice system and doing that earlier preventative work. And obviously we want to support people coming out of prison and again try and prevent them re-entering into the process, shall we say. So Claire, I'll hand over to yourself.
Thanks, and I got back from that other meeting just in time. So yeah, I mean, your points are very well made, and in terms of the diversion of prosecution, and I've been a strong advocate of that, and indeed ran the group in trying to increase the amount of diversion from prosecutions by not taking people into the justice system. We are very lucky in justice social work. We have got a ring-fence budget Councillor Gregg, that is we can only spend on for those in the justice system, and that is based on the activity that we've got and the activity that we're delivering. So there's very close monitoring and work we do with Scottish Government in terms of our budget. So any increases in diversion and bail supervision we're very much funded for. In terms of the early release of prisoners, I do agree that that is an added pressure on us because the prison population has increased so much. And nationally, they've recognised that a lot of the measures that Community Justice Scotland and Scottish Government put in place has not transferred through to those making that sentencing decisions. So, for example, the presumption against short sentences, we already see there's still people getting short sentences when they shouldn't be. So in terms of your question, yes, there's a bit of a pressure. I would say particularly on housing colleagues, there's a pressure. We've got limited stock, and we've also got a commitment that we've made that nobody's released from prison without having accommodation in place. So we're working very closely with our housing and our health colleagues to make sure that those that are being released from prison are going to be supported, and that we've got accommodation in place. But it won't always be permanent accommodation, which our ambition is. We might have to use some temp accommodation. We're working really closely with the prisons just now to determine how many people do we have across the whole prison estate that will come under that early release. Once we get that numbers, we're going to have to then work collectively about how we respond and what resources we're going to need to respond. But I'm confident that we will be able to do it.
Right, that's really encouraging to hear. Thank you. That's really helpful to understand, to get more of an understanding of the local impact of the national policies. So could I ask a similar question about the Caledonian programme? Is that government funded? Because that's got an ongoing increase in participants. That's a really excellent, important programme. But I'm just wondering about the sustainability. Is that going to continue to be funded?
Yes, it will continue to be funded, and so over the Scottish Government monitoring, they look at we put in a lot of figures of how many cases we have on Caledonia and how many cases we've got going through the sex offenders programme, and we are funded basically on what we're delivering. So there is a commitment for that ongoing. So I don't have any concerns about that, Councillor Gregg.
Okay, that's good. And just one final comment. It was really nice and encouraging to read the anonymised feedback from the community payback participants. A lot of it was very touching. You really get to the humanity that were, the impacts, the lived experiences that we're dealing with. So that was really good to see. Although another comment I really dislike, and I really dislike the term payback. I think that transactional approach in justice, and particularly in relation to social work, is not appropriate. Not very helpful. But there's great supportive work. There's so much empathy going on, and there's that real, really focused will to help vulnerable people, in all contexts. So that was something really positive in the report. Thanks.
And thank you for your comments. That's really helpful. And I suppose sometimes we get caught up in the processes and all our governance, but actually it's good to see that. Remember, there's people at the centre of this, and people we report, and I agree that the payback bit is paying back to the community for your sins is not the best thing to do. But one of the things about justice, they are so trauma informed, and they've got that stickability, and that's what the vision is for all services, that they stick with people, the most vulnerable, but also sometimes the most high risk individuals. So it's good. But thank you for your comment, Councillor Gregg.
Thanks. An amazing amount of care going on. Thank you so much. John.
Yeah, no, thanks. Yeah, really interesting report. This one's more out of curiosity, I suppose, and it's about the fact that the report says the number of requests for justice social work reports is now up to beyond pre-pandemic levels, and Val, you touched on this in your intro, and I just wondered, given that the report is 23-24 and so would have gone up to end of March 24, I'm just wondering, are we seeing a continuing rise, or is it sort of plateauing?
But I'll come in just quickly, and then Val will probably know the up-to-date figures better than me. Well, she's maybe scrambling around to find them. So a lot of the increase, as you know, after COVID, there was a huge backlog with the Crown Office. And what they did to get through that backlog, and quite rightly so, they prioritised the really high risk violent offenders and risk in sexual offences were prioritised. So we're still feeling that backlog as we continually go through and take in the new things. So we are still seeing that volume coming through the courts. In terms of the figures, I don't know how much extra that is, but I think it will start to plateau out, but not yet.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, sorry, if you want me to come in on the figures, I just have opened our dashboard and looking at it, certainly there hasn't been any kind of dip really, and the numbers continue to increase in the first quarter of 2024-25.
Yeah, thanks. That's helpful. I mean, I wasn't looking for precise figures, just to kind of just a sense of where things are going, really. But thanks for that.
Good, thank you. Richie.
No additional questions as such. I think the questions have been raised, but just to acknowledge, as you did chair these reports are for noting, but just to acknowledge the amount of work that goes on as part of this and delivering the service. So just a thanks back through to Val and Claire and teams. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all agree with that. So 7.1, happy to agree. 7.1, yes. Okay, thanks very much. Thank you, everyone. 7.2 is the Adult Protection Committee biannual report. 7.2. Again, it's Val.
Yeah. Thank you. I've had a change of hat during the course of the year from adult protection to justice. So,
yeah.
So yes, very happy to present the Adult Protection Committee biennial report for the most recent period. This is for noting by the committee for assurance purposes. This is a statutory report under the Adult Support and Protection Act 2007 that has to be compiled and presented to Scottish Government by the independent convener of the Adult Protection Committee, and it covers the exercise of the committee's functions under the Act. So it has been submitted, well, obviously through the Adult Protection Committee. It's been to COG, the Chief Officers Group for Public Protection, and has been submitted to Scottish Government as required. I'm sure you're probably aware the Adult Protection Committee is a multi-agency committee with representation across the statutory organisations and third sector. And this biennial report is effectively against the committee's improvement plan for the period, and that stemmed significantly from the findings of the joint inspection, which were published in June 2022. So, I mean, just a few key messages. The committee has largely delivered on the plan in the context, as with all of the significant demands and wider pressures on the system. You'll possibly have seen the significant increase in the number of adult protection referrals that have been seen during this biennial period just gone compared to the two previous biennial periods. And financial harm and self-neglect have been the top principal harm types for cases that have progressed to be investigated under the Adult Support and Protection arrangements. Just to say also, the give mention to the role of our Adult Protection Committee Lived Experience Forum, which is facilitated by our advocacy service, and is very active and has done and been involved in various pieces of work, and is really kind of central to ensuring that the user voice is considered as much as we can in terms of taking forward the role of the Adult Protection Committee and partners. So happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Core strength of the adult protection work is obviously the partnership approach, where the various practitioners collaborate, and so there's mention in the report of professional development training and so forth. Is that delivered as a unity to all involved? I mean, it is so vital to keep the practitioners up to date, to support them, to provide that professional training and so forth, so that they can work as effectively as possible, not just as individuals but as a team. So
yeah, the Adult Protection Committee effectively has a learning and development framework which sets out what kind of levels of learning and development are appropriate for which staff groups. The committee has a learning and development subcommittee dedicated to progressing improvement work across that kind of agenda. There's also a Grampian-wide adult support and protection learning and development subgroup, which looks at the wider piece. I mean, it is one of the core statutory functions of the Adult Protection Committee to make sure people are receiving appropriate learning and development. It is offered and progressed on both a multi-agency and single agency basis, on an ongoing and robust basis, I would say. Claire, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to add for information. So from the Chief Officers Group, Councillor Gregg, we're working on, and we recognise the L&D frameworks for across multi-agency partnerships. But what we're going to do is have a public protection. This is what we're going to begin to work on, a public protection learning and development framework for all partners. So taking in adult protection, child protection, MAPA, violence against women. So we're going to, we note, rather than have individual frameworks, we're actually going to have this multi-agency learning for all of public protection, which is our next step.
Yeah, right. I think that makes total sense. Everybody's working operationally as a team, so that collegiate consensus, that culture would naturally be supported by developing the capacities on a partnership basis. So that's good to hear. I just had one other question about the investigatory powers were mainly on economic harm. So I presume, I mean, that would be like defrauding and so forth. I mean, is that an area where adult protection is finding that there's increased vulnerabilities, maybe different age groups, people with different abilities? I just wondered if that's a particularly important emerging theme.
To be honest, financial harm has always been one of the highest types of harm. You know, it's always been in the top three. I think it's we have a standalone Grampian financial harm subgroups because we recognise not only the importance but the complexities of financial harm, and it sits across various age groups, particularly for the older people. And it's not just stranger financial abuse. We have a lot of family members, friends, neighbours. You know, when people are vulnerable, they are susceptible to that type of harm. So we do have a standalone subgroup that are working on that. One of the things we have seen an increase in is self-neglect. And I think there's probably, and the main reason for that is we have done a lot of work on self-neglect, and hoarding comes into that as well. We've got framework in place in Aberdeen City for that, and we have done a lot of work in terms of increasing people's knowledge and skills around self-neglect. So I'm not surprised we're starting to see an increase in the referrals coming in, because it's it's widely more understood, and we have that framework in place of how we respond. So that we are seeing an increase in that. Val, did you want to come in anything about the financial harm aspect of it?
I think you've probably covered it. I see that the topic for National ASP Day next year in February, 8th of February, no, 20th of February 2025, is financial harm. So it's evidently a kind of a theme across the piece. So there'll be a lot of promotional work undertaken around that time. But as I say, yeah, as Claire said, locally it is an issue that we look at on an ongoing basis.
Grand, thank you. I mean, it's such a covert form of wrongdoing. It will be undoubtedly very difficult to identify in many cases. So so there will be hidden harm as well. But it's really good to see that cases are being identified and tackled. So that's all helpful. Any other questions on that item? Can we agree? 7.2? All agreed? Grand, thank you. So 7.3 is the Q2 delivery plan, which is Callum Leask. 7.3.
Yes, good morning. I can briefly introduce the paper if you like, Martin.
Yes, please.
So the paper is the Q2 delivery plan update. The report is for noting and seeks to provide the committee with assurance in relation to the progress of the delivery plan. Follows a similar structure to that the committee will be familiar with. It provides an update on progress through various appendices, so the delivery plan overview, the delivery plan tracker, and the delivery plan dashboard as well. Just a couple of points that might be worth noting. So in 4.6, you will see that there has been a change in description at the programme level with specific reference to the expansion of hospital at home. And in relation to 4.7, as part of our review of existing data flow processes, we have been able to provide more updates in relation to some of the key metrics that form part of the performance dashboard. Nothing else that I feel is necessary to draw attention to at this time, but happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Callum. It is a very comprehensive overview of our area of delivery. On that hospital at home expansion. So is that, so just to get that clear, that's a reduction from 100. So the target's down from 100 to 50. Is that just because it's a more realistic? That's more realistic, more achievable target.
Yeah, so the rationale that we've provided is that, you know, we're still trying to expand the service within the existing funding envelope, but really what we're trying to do is maximize the usage of the existing beds. So there is more efficiencies that can be done within that existing envelope. So it's just trying to get that balance right between maximizing the efficiencies of the existing beds and that expansion as well. So that's the rationale provided for that.
Right. Thank you. It's really good to see the clarity and the comprehensiveness of this report. Really helpful. Any questions on 7.3? Nope. It all speaks for itself. That's a really good quality update. Thank you very much, Callum. We're all agreed on 7.3, are we? Yeah, great. Thank you very much, Callum, for the update. 8.1, we have no exempt or confidential business. So that takes us to the final item, which is noting the date of the next meeting, which is on the 25th of February. So thank you everyone for your participation and your contributions. Thank you for a really positive, productive meeting, and look forward to seeing you on the 25th of February. Thanks. All the best. Bye now.
Thanks, Martin.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.